everyone, and welcome back. Today we're diving into something pretty amazing. We're going to be talking about dynamic memory.
Dynamic memory.
Dynamic memory. And we're looking at Roger C. Shank's 1982 book, Dynamic Memory, a theory of reminding and learning in computers and people.
Oh, well, 1982,
I know, right?
that's going back a little bit.
Yeah, it really is. But you know that this book was so ahead of its time, it's still super relevant today, and that's why we're taking this deep dive into it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What I always find fascinating is how often these really groundbreaking ideas in AI and cognitive science, they kind of come up and then they get forgotten about for a while and then they reemerge as people realize just how powerful they really are.
It's like we're rediscovering these hidden gems. So before we jump in, I think it would be helpful to set the stage a little bit for our listeners. You know, when we think about memory, a lot of times we picture like this filing cabinet in our minds, right? Where information is just neatly stored away.
Yeah, like a big mental warehouse.
Exactly. But Schank, he comes along and just blows that whole idea out of the water.
He does. He basically says, look, our memories, they're not static. They're not just sitting there gathering dust. Instead, they're constantly changing. They're reorganizing. They're adapting based on our experiences. It's not a filing cabinet. It's more like
A living organism.
like a living organism
Yeah.
that's constantly growing and evolving. He actually even compares it to a library catalog.
A library catalog.
Yeah, think about it. A library catalog is constantly being updated with new books,
Right.
New interests emerge, old books become less relevant, and the catalog reflects that.
So our memories, they're kind of like that, they're constantly being reshaped and reorganized as we encounter new information and our understanding of the world changes.
Exactly, and that's what makes it so dynamic. It's not just about storing information. It's about how that information interacts and changes over time.
That's such a cool way to think about it. Now, Schenk talks a lot about how our expectations play a huge role in memory. And he even says that when something unexpected happens, when our expectations are violated, it can actually lead to a stronger memory of that event. Why is that?
Well, think about it this way. Imagine you're at a restaurant and the waiter brings you the bill before you've even ordered your food.
That would be strange.
It would be super unexpected, right?
Mm.
And it would probably stick in your memory a lot more than just a typical dining experience where everything goes as planned.
Yeah, I totally get that. It's like your brain is saying, hold on a second, this isn't how it's supposed to go. Let me make a note of this.
Exactly. And Schank calls these unexpected events expectation failures. And he says they're absolutely crucial for learning.
Expectation failures. So like when things don't go the way we expect them to.
Precisely. Because when that happens, it forces us to reevaluate our understanding of the situation. We have to update our mental models of how things work.
I'm starting to see how this all fits together, but I gotta be honest, the idea that failures are actually good for learning, it feels kind of counterintuitive, right? I mean, we usually try to avoid making mistakes, don't we?
Yeah, of course, we don't want to intentionally mess things up. But Schank isn't saying we should go out and seek failure. Instead, what he's doing is highlighting the fact that failures are inevitable and they provide incredibly valuable opportunities for growth.
Oh, so it's like viewing mistakes as feedback.
Exactly. Every time we make a mistake, we're essentially gathering data about what works and what doesn't.
That's a great point. So instead of beating ourselves up over mistakes, maybe we should view them as valuable lessons.
You got it. Now, to really understand how these expectation failures work, let's break down the different types that Schank identifies.
Okay, let's do it.
All right, so the first one is misperception of the situation. Have you ever totally misread a situation or misunderstood instructions?
All the time. Like that time I showed up to a party in jeans and a t-shirt and everyone else was dressed to the nines. Talk about a misperception.
That's the perfect example. And those kinds of situations, they tend to stick with us because they force us to reevaluate our assumptions and pay closer attention to context in the future.
Yeah, you definitely learn from those awkward moments. What's another type of expectation failure?
Okay, so the next one is pretty straightforward. It's called lack of resources.
So basically when you don't have the tools or the information you need to succeed, like trying to bake a cake without any flour.
Exactly. And then there's disbelief. Sometimes we fail because we simply don't believe that we can achieve something.
Oh, I know that feeling. It's like a mental block that keeps you from even trying.
Exactly, and that can be a huge obstacle to overcome. Another type is lack of ability, which means we simply don't have the skills or the knowledge needed for a particular task.
That reminds me of the time I tried to fix a leaky faucet and ended up flooding my entire bathroom. Turns out plumbing requires a bit more expertise than I have.
Yeah, sometimes it's better to call in the professionals, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, we have the classic lack of common sense category. I think that one speaks for itself.
Yeah, we've all had those moments where we just shake our heads and think, what was I thinking? But here's what I find interesting. Schank uses this example in his book of a woman who's diving for sand dollars at the beach. And he describes how she keeps diving in the same spot, even though there are no sand dollars to be found there.
I remember that example. It's a bit puzzling at first,
And
right?
exactly. Because at first glance, you might just think, oh, well, that's just a lack of common sense. But Schank challenges us to go deeper. He says that by analyzing her actions through the lens of those failure categories, we might uncover a totally different explanation.
You're right. Maybe she misperceived the location where sand dollars are usually found, or maybe
Hmm.
there was some physical limitation preventing her from diving in deeper waters. Maybe she was actually looking for something else entirely, and we just misinterpreted her actions.
So it's about considering all the possibilities, not just jumping to conclusions.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that behavior is complex, and there might be underlying factors that we're not aware of.
That's such an important point. Now, Schank talks about these scripts, which are like generalized sequences of events that we expect to happen in certain situations, like going to a restaurant or going to the doctor. They help us understand and predict what's going to happen. But he also argues that they're not quite enough to capture the full complexity of human memory.
You're right. Scripts are a good starting point, but they're kind of like a simplified version of reality. To really understand how our memories work, we need to go beyond those basic scripts.
Okay, so if scripts are just the starting point, what's the next level up?
That's where things get even more interesting. Schank introduces the concept of memory organization packets, or MOPs for short.
MOP.
MOPs. Think of them as higher-level structures that organize our memories based on goals and actions. They don't just capture the sequence of events, but also the physical, societal, and the personal aspects of an experience.
Okay, so it's like layering different perspectives on top of the experience, each one adding a new dimension to our understanding.
Exactly. And Schank uses the example of going to the doctor to illustrate this. He says that there are several different MOPs at play during that experience.
Yeah.
You've got the M Health Protection MOP, which is all about seeking medical care to protect your health. Then there's the MPOV, or Point of View MOP, which organizes memories from the perspectives of both the patient and the doctor.
So we're not just remembering what happened, but also how we felt and how the other person involved might have felt.
Exactly. And then there's even the M-Contract MOPI, which highlights the implicit agreement between the patient and the doctor about payment and services.
Yeah.
This example also introduces the concept of scenes as the building blocks of MOPs.
Scenes.
Yeah. Think of them as distinct parts of the overall experience, each with its own set of expectations and actions.
So we're breaking down these complex experiences into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Exactly. And by organizing our memories this way, we can create a much richer and more nuanced understanding of our experiences.
This is fascinating stuff. We've got scripts, we've got MOPs. Is there even more to this memory puzzle?
There is. Schank takes it a step further with the concept of thematic organization points, or TOPs. And these are like the highest level of memory organization. They represent abstract themes and goals that connect seemingly disparate experiences.
Okay, now we're getting really abstract. I think I'm going to need a real-life example to wrap my head around this one.
All right. Imagine two people having a conversation about, let's say, international diplomacy.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Schank would say that different TOPs might be influencing their understanding and their responses during this conversation. One person might be operating under the top P of achieving peace.
So their arguments might focus on strategies for conflict resolution and building trust between nations.
Exactly. While the other person might be operating under the top of national security.
And their arguments might focus on protecting their country's interests and maintaining a strong military.
Right. So even though they're talking about the same topic, their different TOPs shape their perspectives and their arguments.
This is blowing my mind. It's like Schank has given us this whole new language for understanding how our memories work.
He really has. Now, here's another big question. With all these experiences and memories stored in our brains, how do we actually find the right ones when we need them?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. It's like finding a specific book in a massive library. There has to be some kind of system.
Well, that's where indices come in. Think of them like keywords or tags that help us locate specific memories.
Like a mental search engine.
Exactly. Schank describes three main methods of index generation.
Okay, I'm ready for it. Hit me with those methods.
All right, the first one is called content frame search. Basically, we use the content of the current situation to trigger relevant memories.
So if I'm trying to remember where I left my keys, I might start by thinking about the last time I used them. What was I doing? Where was I going?
Right. The content of that situation can act as a cue to jog your memory. The second method is called reconstructing by precedences. This is where we use the sequence of events leading up to the current situation as an index.
So if I'm trying to remember the name of a restaurant I went to last week, I might try to retrace my steps. What did I do that day? Who was I with? And hopefully that helps me remember the restaurant.
Exactly. It's like creating a timeline in your mind. And the third method is called map search. We use spatial or contextual information to locate memories.
So if I'm trying to remember where I parked my car in a huge parking lot, I might try to think about landmarks. Was I near a particular store or was there a tree nearby? Anything that helps me narrow down the possibilities.
Exactly. So we have these three powerful tools for searching our memories: content, sequence, and location.
This is all so much more intricate than I ever imagined. We've covered a lot of ground today, and I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of this dynamic world of memory.
You're right, we have. There's so much more to explore in Shank's work, but I think this is a good place to pause for now.
Yeah, let's take a break and come back to this fascinating topic in our next part.
That's good. All right, so welcome back. Remember that roast beef sandwich story I mentioned?
Oh, yeah, you left us hanging with that one. I'm definitely curious to hear more.
Okay, so picture this. Schank and his colleague Norman, they're at the university cafeteria grabbing some lunch, and they're in the sandwich line. And Norman's watching the server slicing the roast beef when all of a sudden he just exclaims, "Boy, have I ever been suckered."
Whoa, hold on. What on earth could trigger that kind of reaction from just like watching someone slice roast beef?
But it all comes down to this tiny detail that most people wouldn't even notice.
Yeah.
So the server had previously sliced some roast beef, right? And as she was making the sandwich, she took the meat from the side that had already been partially sliced instead of cutting a fresh piece from the roast. It was like she took the slice that was almost falling off already.
You think I'm picturing it. So she was taking a slice that was already partially cut off instead of slicing a fresh piece.
Exactly. And for whatever reason, this little detail, it was sparked this really vivid memory for Norman. Like he felt like he had been tricked or cheated in a similar way in the past.
Wow, that's incredible. I never would have thought that something as mundane as like how roast beef is sliced could trigger such a strong emotional response.
Right. So the question is, what was it about this slicing technique that brought back that feeling of being suckered? Like what specific memory was he reminded of?
Yeah, what was the connection?
Well, Schank doesn't actually tell us what specific memory was triggered for Norman, and I think that's part of the point. He uses this example to illustrate just how complex memory really is, and how a simple observation can unleash this whole cascade of associations and emotions.
So it's not just about remembering the facts of an event, it's about the entire web of feelings and experiences that are woven into that memory.
Exactly. Schank says that this seemingly insignificant detail triggered all these associations in Norman's mind, connecting this present experience to a past event where he felt similarly taken advantage of. You know, it's like those times when you suddenly have a flash of memory triggered by a smell or a song or even just a phrase.
Oh, yeah, totally. Like those sensory details act as these keys that unlock whole chapters of our past.
Precisely. And what makes this roast beef sandwich example so powerful is that it highlights how even the smallest, most unexpected things can trigger these complex chains of memories and associations. It's amazing, isn't it?
It really makes you question everything you thought you knew about how memory works.
It does.
Oh.
And Schank really emphasizes how this dynamic nature of memory is crucial for learning. He says that understanding, remembering, and learning are all completely intertwined. Every time we experience something new, it doesn't just get added to our mental filing cabinet, it interacts with our existing knowledge and memories, shaping our understanding of the world around us.
So it's like our memories are constantly being rewritten and updated based on these new experiences.
Exactly. It's a constant process of integration and adaptation.
Okay, that's fascinating. But I have to ask, how does all of this actually apply to our lives? Like, what are the practical implications of understanding dynamic memory?
That's a great question. Let's think about it in terms of learning. If our memories are constantly evolving, it means that the way we approach learning also needs to be dynamic, right?
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we approach learning in a more dynamic way?
Well, instead of just trying to memorize facts and figures, we need to focus on making connections, asking questions, and constantly challenging our understanding.
So it's more about cultivating curiosity and flexibility rather than just cramming information.
You got it. And this applies to everything, not just formal education. Every experience, every interaction, every conversation. They all have the potential to shape our understanding of the world.
That's a powerful thought. It really emphasizes how much agency we have in shaping our own learning and growth.
Absolutely. And Shanks argues that by embracing this dynamic nature of memory, we can become more effective learners, more adaptable problem solvers, more insightful thinkers.
I love that. No, I remember earlier you mentioned these different types of reminding: dictionary-based, episodic, and goal-based reminding. Can you refresh our memory on what those are all about?
Sure. So let's start with dictionary-based reminding. This is the simplest type where a specific stimulus triggers a direct association, like looking up a word in a dictionary.
So, like seeing a familiar face and instantly remembering their name, or hearing a song from your childhood and being flooded with memories of that time.
Exactly. It's a very direct link between a stimulus and a memory.
Okay, what about episodic reminding?
This one is a bit more complex. It involves recalling a specific event or episode from the past, and the trigger can be a place, a smell, a sound, or even an emotion.
So, like walking into your childhood home and suddenly remembering all these details about your life there, even though you haven't thought about them in years.
Exactly. It's like
Uh,
those sensory details transport you back to that time and place.
That makes sense. And finally, what's goal-based reminding?
This type is all about how our goals and motivations shape what we remember. We're more likely to remember information that's relevant to our current goals.
So if I'm training for a marathon, I'm more likely to remember information about running techniques, nutrition injury prevention, things like that.
Precisely. Your brain is prioritizing information that's aligned with your goals. And it can also work in reverse. Like, let's say you're working on a project and you suddenly remember a similar project you worked on in the past, even though you hadn't thought about it in years.
So it's like our current goals can actually trigger memories that are relevant to those goals.
Exactly. And what's really fascinating is that Schank argues that all of these different types of reminding are driven by the same underlying process, the search for relevant prior experiences.
So whether it's a simple association, a vivid episode, or a goal-driven memory, our brains are constantly searching for connections to make sense of the world.
Precisely. And this brings us back to the idea that memory isn't just this passive storage system, it's an active process of construction, reconstruction, and connection making. As Schank puts it, understanding is remembering, and remembering is learning.
Wow, that's a really powerful statement.
It really is. It captures the essence of his work. And as we delve deeper, we continue to uncover these profound implications for how we learn, how we understand the world, and even how we see ourselves.
This is all so fascinating. I feel like I'm already starting to see the world through a different lens thanks to Shank's insights.
I'm glad to hear that. Now, are you ready to dive into the world of memory structures? That's where Schank takes us beyond scripts and MOPs to explore even more complex levels of organization.
I'm ready for the next level of this memory adventure. Let's do it. All right, so we're ready to explore those deeper levels of memory organization you mentioned. What's beyond scripts and MOPs?
Well, remember how MOPs organize our memories based on goals and actions? Schank suggests we can take this even further by generalizing from those specific experiences to broader themes and principles.
So it's like figuring out the main point or the message from what we experience.
Precisely. And that's where thematic organization points, or TOPs, come in. They're these abstract themes and goals that link together experiences that seem totally different.
Okay, so like if I'm learning a new language, would that fall under a TOP?
It could. Imagine the top E of communication.
Mm.
Learning a new language would fit under that. But so would other things like giving a presentation at work, or writing a persuasive essay, or having a deep talk with a friend. They all involve getting information across and connecting with others.
So TOPs help us create these mental frameworks that connect specific events to bigger concepts.
Exactly. TOPs help us understand new experiences by connecting them to these broader themes.
Huh.
Remember that conversation we talked about before where two people were discussing international diplomacy?
Yeah, one person was focused on achieving peace and the other on national security.
Right. Those are TOPs in action. Even though they were talking about the same topic, their different TOPs shaped how they saw things and what they argued for.
So TOPs are like lenses that color how we see the world and understand what we go through.
That's a great way to put it. They really do shape our perspective.
Wow, this has been a lot to take in. We've covered so much ground today.
We have. And we've only scratched the surface of what Schank explores in his book.
So if you had to sum up the most important thing for our listeners to remember, what would it be?
I'd say this.
Yeah.
Your memory isn't just a recording of the past. It's always changing. It's a process of building and rebuilding and making connections. And when you understand that you can become a better learner, a better problem solver, and a more insightful thinker.
That's a great way to put it. It really gets to the heart of Shank's work.
It does. And Shank's book, Dynamic Memory, digs even deeper into all of this. He even talks about how these ideas apply to artificial intelligence.
So his work is still relevant today, even with all the advances in AI and machine learning.
Absolutely. His insights into how memory works and how we learn are super important as we try to create machines that can think and learn like humans do.
This has been such an incredible exploration into the world of dynamic memory. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of how my own mind works.
That's great to hear. And remember, this is just the beginning. There's so much more to explore in Shank's work, and we encourage you to keep thinking about these ideas and how they apply to your own life.
Well, on that note, we'll leave you to ponder all of this and explore the dynamic world of your own memory. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time.